powerful CEO hired 10 of the country's most expensive tutors for her silent son, but none of them could reach him until she secretly watched the new janitor, a grieving single father, teach the boy how to speak again. Your methods are clearly not working. This is the last time you will fail my son. The sterile silence of the cavernous office was shattered by the pounding rain that hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, each drop a tiny, desperate fist against the gleaming, impenetrable glass. Elena Vance stood with her back to the room, a commanding silhouette against the stormy cityscape, her impeccable designer suit feeling more like armor than clothing, as she watched the 10th highly credentialed specialist pack his polished leather briefcase with a frustrated sigh. She froze. The specialist, a man with 3 PhDs and a 6-figure consultation fee, had just been dismissed, his face a mask of professional indignation. But it was not his departure that made the air in Elena's lungs turn to biting cold. It was the sound from the adjoining playroom, a sound that always managed to splinter the careful composure she had built around her heart. A low, wounded cry, followed by the sharp, frantic thud of a small body hitting the padded floor in a wave of unbearable frustration. Her son, Liam, was lost in his own storm, and she, the woman who could command boardrooms and move markets with a single word, was utterly powerless to calm the tempest inside her own child. He was gone. Leo Martinez felt the weariness deep in his bones, a hollow ache that had settled there the day he buried his wife and had never truly left. The worn fabric of his janitor's uniform was clean but threadbare at the elbows, a quiet testament to his long hours and meager pay, and the scent of industrial cleaner clung to him like a second skin. He pushed his cart down the polished marble corridor of Vance Innovations' executive floor, the soft squeak of the wheels echoing in the soft hush of the after-hours building. He worked this late shift so he could be there in the mornings to make Mateo his breakfast, to walk his own son to school with a steady hand holding his small one. As he passed the CEO's suite, a sound made him falter, his hand tightening on the cart's handle. It was the raw, shattered sound of a child's deep distress, a sound any parent recognizes as a seismic crack in the world. He knew he should keep moving, that the unspoken rule was to be invisible, a ghost who polished surfaces and emptied trash, but the cries were so desperate, so drenched in a pain he understood. His heart thudded. He hesitated for only a moment, his own profound grief for his lost Maria echoing in the sound of the child's sobs, a shared language of loss that transcended the ornate door and the gleaming nameplate. Overcome by a selfless, paternal instinct, he gently pushed the door, which was slightly ajar, and peered inside. The playroom was a masterpiece of expensive educational toys and custom furniture, all of it ignored by the small boy with pale, tear-streaked cheeks who was curled into a trembling ball on a thick, plush rug. There was no one else there. Leo's gaze, gentle and unwavering, took in the scene, and he felt a tender pang of recognition. He'd seen this kind of silent scream in Mateo after Maria had passed, a grief too big for a small body to contain. He quietly slipped into the room, his worn work boots making no sound on the luxurious carpet. He knelt a careful distance away, not speaking, not wanting to frighten the child. From his pocket, he pulled a small, worn object, a simple wooden rattle, smoothed by the countless times he and Mateo had held it. It had been his son's favorite. He gave it a soft, rhythmic shake. The sound was gentle, not a demand for attention but a quiet offering, a soft hush in the storm of the boy's emotions. Liam's frantic sobs faltered. He uncurled slightly, his glistening eyes, wide and haunted, fixing on the janitor. Leo offered a small, sincere smile, his own eyes filled with an unspoken understanding. He shook the rattle again, a steady, calming beat. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. He began to hum a soft, simple lullaby, the one Maria used to sing to Mateo. It was a melody of pure, unconditional love. Inside her main office, separated from the playroom by one-way glass, Elena watched the scene unfold on her security monitor, her breath caught in her throat. She had seen 10 experts with charts and theories and methodologies fail to do what this janitor, this stranger, was doing with nothing more than a cheap wooden rattle and a quiet song. A warmth spread through her chest, a feeling so foreign she almost didn't recognize it. It was hope. She watched as Liam, her silent, unreachable son, slowly, tentatively, crawled toward the janitor. He didn't make a sound, but he reached out a small, trembling hand and placed it on Leo's knee. Connection. Leo stopped humming and simply sat with the boy, his presence a steady, dignified anchor in the child's turbulent sea. It was a sacred moment of pure, innocent trust, and Elena felt a cathartic sob build in her throat. She didn't know it yet, but this single, selfless act of kindness had just rewritten her entire world. The man's gentle face, his weary but kind eyes, were etched into her memory. She had to know who he was. But as she watched, a sharp, disapproving voice cut through the quiet moment from the doorway. "What do you think you're doing? You are not authorized to be in here." It was Mr. Abernathy, the floor manager, his face a mask of indignation. Leo's face went pale. He stood up slowly, tucking the rattle away, his shoulders slumping in quiet resolve. He tried to explain, but Abernathy cut him off, his voice crisp and cruel. "Interacting with the CEO's family? That's an immediate termination offense. Collect your things. You're done here." Leo simply nodded, his dignity a threadbare shield against the brutal injustice. He gave one last, sad look at Liam, who watched him go with wide, confused eyes. On the monitor, Elena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He was being fired for showing her son a kindness no amount of her money could buy. She watched the gentle janitor walk away, his weary posture speaking of a man for whom hardship was a constant companion. The playroom was silent again, but this time, it was a heavy, unbearable silence, filled with loss. He vanished. The days that followed were draped in a heavy fog of guilt and a strange, renewed sense of purpose for Elena. The image of the janitor's gentle face was a constant, haunting presence, a stark contrast to the sterile opulence of her life. She had her assistant, a discreet and efficient woman named Clara, pull the man's employment file. His name was Leo Martinez, a single father, widower. His address was in a part of the city her sleek, chauffeur-driven car never had reason to visit. A quiet shame washed over her. She, who prided herself on knowing every aspect of her company, had known nothing of the dignified, suffering man who cleaned her floors. The injustice of his firing, orchestrated by an overzealous manager enforcing a policy she herself had approved, felt like a personal failing of unbearable weight. She couldn't simply reinstate him. That would draw too much attention and humiliate the man further. No, her response had to be as quiet and dignified as his act of kindness had been. Her intervention would be a secret, a tender, unspoken apology. First, she had Clara make a few discreet calls. Within a day, a prestigious logistics firm, a subsidiary of a company in which Vance Innovations held a majority stake, reached out to Leo Martinez with a job offer. It was a warehouse supervisor position with better hours, a significant pay raise, and full health benefits for him and his son. Leo, who had spent the last week in a state of quiet desperation, scouring job listings and trying to shield his son from his own gnawing anxiety, was stunned by the offer. It felt like a miracle, a lifeline thrown into the churning waters of his despair. He accepted immediately, a wave of profound relief washing over his weary soul. He didn't know, he could never have known, that the CEO he had never met was the hidden architect of his salvation, watching over him from a distance. Elena didn't stop there. She arranged for an anonymous donation to be made to the agency that held his overdue medical bills from his late wife's illness, wiping the debt clean. A grocery delivery service, paid for a year in advance by a secret benefactor, began leaving boxes of fresh food on his doorstep each week. These were small acts for a woman of her means, but they were her way of trying to balance the scales, to repay a kindness so pure it had reawakened a part of her heart she thought had long since turned to stone. Meanwhile, back in the gleaming tower of commerce, Liam's world remained silent. Elena hired an 11th tutor, then a 12th. They came with new theories and glowing recommendations, but they all failed. They couldn't replicate the gentle magic that had unfolded in the playroom that rainy evening. They lacked the sincerity, the unspoken empathy that had flowed so naturally from the kind-hearted janitor. One evening, as she sat in Liam's darkened room, watching his fitful sleep, she picked up a small object from his bedside table. It was a simple wooden rattle. A security guard had found it on the floor of the playroom the night Leo was fired. Liam had refused to let it go, clutching it as if it were a sacred artifact. In that moment, staring at the worn, simple toy, Elena understood with undeniable clarity. It wasn't a method or a technique her son needed. It was a person. It was Leo. The decision solidified in her heart, a quiet resolve that felt more right than any business deal she had ever made. She had to find him, not to offer him charity from the shadows, but to ask for his help, to humble herself before the one person who had been able to reach her son. The following afternoon, Elena Vance drove her own car, a sleek, unassuming sedan, to the address in Leo's file. The neighborhood was a world away from her stately mansion, with worn but tidy apartment buildings and the sound of children playing in the street. She felt a trembling in her hands as she walked up the 3 flights of stairs to his apartment. The door was opened by a small boy with large, dark eyes so much like his father's. "Papa," he called out, and then Leo appeared, his expression shifting from confusion to stunned recognition. He looked different without the janitor's uniform, wearing a simple, clean shirt and jeans. He looked tired, but the hollow desperation in his eyes had been replaced by a steady calm. "Ms. Vance?" he asked, his voice a quiet murmur. She felt a lump form in her throat. He knew who she was. "Mr. Martinez," she began, her voice softer than she intended. "May I come in? I need to talk to you about my son." The inside of his apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but it was filled with a warmth that her cavernous mansion profoundly lacked. Children's drawings were taped to the walls, and the scent of cinnamon lingered in the air. As Mateo played quietly in the corner with a set of wooden blocks, Elena explained everything. She told him about the security monitor, about watching his gentle interaction with Liam, and about the deep, seismic impact it had on her. She confessed her guilt over his firing and admitted that her anonymous help was a clumsy attempt to right a terrible wrong. Leo listened with his characteristic quiet dignity, his unflinching gaze making her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. He wasn't angry. There was only a sad understanding in his eyes. He spoke of his late wife, Maria, and how she had a gift for understanding the unspoken needs of children. The rattle, he explained, had been a gift she had carved for Mateo. "Sometimes," he said, his voice thick with raw emotion, "a child isn't acting out. They're just trying to speak a language we've forgotten how to hear." His words resonated deep within Elena's soul, articulating the very truth she had been struggling to grasp. It was a confession of shared fragility, a bond forged over the silent struggles of their children. Then, with a humility that felt both foreign and cathartic, Elena made her offer. She didn't want him as a janitor. She wanted him to work with Liam, not as a tutor with a rigid curriculum, but as a companion, a guide. She would pay him triple what his new job was paying, provide a car, whatever he needed. She was offering him wealth and security, but her tone made it clear that what she was truly doing was pleading. Leo looked at his own son, then back at the powerful CEO whose polished exterior had cracked to reveal a desperate, loving mother. He saw the same fear and hope he lived with every day. It was a connection far deeper than employer and employee. It was the undeniable kinship of 2 parents willing to do anything for their children. He saw the truth. It was his duty. "Yes," he said, the single word sealing a pact that would change both their lives forever. "I'll help him." The transformation in Liam was not immediate, but it was undeniable. With Leo's gentle and unwavering presence, the storms within the little boy began to quiet. Leo didn't use flashcards or educational software. He used patience and sincerity. They spent hours in the park, not talking, but simply watching the birds. Leo taught Liam how to skip stones across the pond, his quiet instructions a soft murmur against the backdrop of nature. He brought Mateo over for playdates, and the 2 boys, one silent and one chattering, formed their own innocent, unspoken bond. Elena would watch them from the window of her home office, a tender warmth spreading through her chest. She saw her son smile for the first time in over a year, a real, genuine smile that reached his glistening eyes. And one afternoon, as Leo was showing Liam how to plant a sunflower seed in the garden, Liam looked at the small sprout in his hand, then up at Leo, and whispered a single, fragile word. More. The sound, as soft as a prayer, was a seismic event in Elena's world. A sob of pure, cathartic joy escaped her lips. He had spoken. He had come back. As the weeks turned into months, Elena found herself drawn not just to the miracle Leo was performing with her son, but to the man himself. They fell into a comfortable routine, sharing quiet dinners after the boys were asleep. They would sit in the amber hue of her stately kitchen, a space that had always felt cold and sterile, and fill it with conversation. Leo would talk about Maria, not with shattered grief, but with a gentle, loving reverence that made Elena feel as though she knew her. He spoke of their dreams of opening a small community center, a safe place for children. In turn, Elena found herself opening up to him, sharing the vulnerabilities she kept hidden behind her commanding corporate persona. She spoke of her profound loneliness, the biting cold of a life filled with success but devoid of genuine connection. She confessed that her ex-husband, Richard, Liam's father, saw their son's silence as a flaw, a reflection of her own supposed failings as a mother. This confession scene, repeated over many nights with cups of tea and shared, weary sighs, forged a bond of deep, unspoken affection between them. They were two broken people, haunted by different ghosts, who were slowly, gently, helping each other heal. The friendship was a soft glow. It was becoming more. To celebrate the launch of the Vance Foundation, a new philanthropic endeavor aimed at funding innovative child wellness programs, Elena hosted a grand gala at a polished, downtown museum. The cavernous hall was filled with the city's elite, a sea of impeccable tuxedos and shimmering gowns. Elena, looking stately and radiant, had insisted that Leo and Matteo attend as her personal guests of honor. Leo, uncomfortable but handsome in a rented tuxedo, stood by her side, a quiet, dignified presence amidst the ornate splendor. Matteo, in a tiny suit, held his father's hand, his eyes wide with wonder. For a few hours, they felt like a family, a small, hopeful island in a sea of polite, transactional conversations. But the illusion was shattered by the arrival of Richard Sterling. He was handsome, crisp, and exuded an aura of cold, elitist entitlement. He approached them with a cruel smirk playing on his lips, his gaze flicking over Leo with open disdain. The public humiliation was about to begin. "Elena, darling." Richard's voice was smooth but laced with venom, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I see you've brought the help," he gestured dismissively at Leo. "Is this your new pet project? A janitor to fix our son?" It's a bold, if pathetic, PR move. No wonder the boy is still a mess. The words, sharp and deliberately cruel, hung in the air. A ripple of whispers went through the crowd. Leo went pale, but he stood straighter, his hand protectively on Matteo's shoulder. He met Richard's gaze with an unflinching, steady silence, his dignity his only shield. He would not let this man break him. Elena felt a surge of white-hot fury, but her voice, when she spoke, was calm, clear, and commanding. It was the voice she used to dismantle corporate rivals, and it sliced through the hushed room, turning every head in their direction. The salvation scene had arrived. "Richard," she began, her tone dangerously soft, "you are mistaken. This is Leo Martinez, and he is not my project. He is the man who saved my son." She took a step forward, placing a hand on Leo's arm, a public gesture of unwavering solidarity. "For a year," she announced to the captivated audience, "I hired the best and most expensive minds in child psychology. They all failed. They saw a problem to be solved, a puzzle to be figured out. They never bothered to see the boy." Her gaze swept the room, landing back on her stunned ex-husband. "Then I met Leo. He wasn't looking at a problem. He was looking at a child. He didn't use charts or theories. He used kindness. He used patience. He used a sincerity that you, Richard, and frankly, most people in this room, wouldn't recognize. A gasp echoed through the hall. She wasn't finished. This foundation we are launching tonight is not just a name on a building. It's a new philosophy, and I am thrilled to announce its new co-director, who will be heading our practical outreach programs, Mr. Leo Martinez. Total silence. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted. It had been completely inverted. Richard's face was a mask of disbelief and rage. He was speechless. Elena turned to Leo, her eyes shimmering with unspoken emotion. "He didn't just teach my son how to speak again," she said, her voice cracking with raw, tender feeling. "He taught me how to listen. He reminded me that the most profound healing comes not from wealth or power, but from a pure, selfless human connection." With the entire room as her witness, she turned back to Richard. "As for you, your position on this foundation's board is hereby terminated. Your brand of cruelty has no place in the future I am building for my son." She then looked directly at Leo, her heart in her eyes. "Or for myself, it was a declaration. Promise. A final, undeniable victory of virtue over cruelty." 1 year later, the golden glow of a late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of a warm, comfortable home that was neither a cavernous mansion nor a threadbare apartment, but something new they had built together. The sound of children's laughter echoed from the backyard, a joyous, melodic sound. Liam and Mateo, now inseparable brothers, were chasing a puppy across a lush green lawn. Liam's voice was the loudest, a stream of happy, confident chatter. Inside, Elena, dressed in a soft sweater and jeans, leaned against Leo in the kitchen, her head resting on his shoulder as he stirred a pot of simmering pasta sauce. The air was filled with the scent of garlic and basil, the aroma of family and home. The Vance Martinez Foundation for Child Wellness had become a nationally recognized success. Its innovative, empathy-based programs, designed and run by Leo, changing thousands of lives. He had found his true calling, and in doing so had shown Elena how to find hers. She had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of her company, finding more profound fulfillment in her work with the foundation and, more importantly, in the quiet, sacred moments with her new family. He turned from the stove and his gentle hands cupped her face. His eyes, once so weary, were now filled with a deep, steady love. "I love you, Elena," he whispered, the words as sincere and pure as his first act of kindness. "And I love you, Leo," she replied, her voice thick with a happiness she once thought was impossible. Theirs was a love story built not on a grand, dramatic gesture, but on the quiet, unwavering power of a good man's gentle heart and the brave, open heart of a woman who was wise enough to recognize its worth. It was their happily ever after. This story is a testament to the idea that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the capacity for kindness. It is a fable of how one small, selfless act, offered without any expectation of reward, can set in motion a series of events that heal the deepest of wounds and forge the most profound of bonds. Leo's simple humanity was more powerful than all of Elena's resources, a reminder that in a world that often feels cold and transactional, the most valuable currency we possess is empathy. It is the story of a shattered mother, a grieving father, and two lonely children who found in each other the missing pieces of their hearts, creating a family not by blood, but by a sacred, undeniable love. If this story touched your heart, it's because it speaks to a universal truth we all carry within us. The deep human need to be seen, to be understood, and to be loved for who we are, not what we have. It is a reminder that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear a janitor's uniform and carry a simple wooden rattle. For more soul-stirring tales that celebrate the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit, please like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales. We believe in the power of heartwarming stories to inspire and uplift. We'll see you in the next one.